Hello everyone and welcome to the Evangelist Garrett channel. One of Frederick II's first acts as Holy Roman Emperor, sensing that now with the papal crowning ceremony completed he could fulfill his commitment to Crusade, was to send Louis, Duke of Bavaria, to Damietta. They left immediately with an army under strict orders not to engage the enemy until he arrived. When Louis did arrive at Damietta, he saw something that concerned him. He found an army that had not campaigned in a year and worried that they were falling into a false sense of comfort. While this frustrated Louis, he remembered his orders not to engage or move on Cairo until Frederick's arrival. The papal legate Pelagius favored an immediate campaign against Cairo, feeling now they had better chances to accomplish a mission. The division between the legate and the Crusader force, now led by two armies loyal to Frederick, may have been more about the warring between Frederick and the Pope in Europe than that some new great tactical advantage had actually arisen. The Crusades stood to lose a great deal of good knights if they couldn't work something out. They had sat for a year after turning down what most of them wanted, Jerusalem. One army had already left. The Crusade leaders compromised, deciding to attack Mansoura. In 1221 AD, the Crusader army marched south under the scorching hot desert sun, down the Nile, toward Al-Kamil. July is extremely hot around Cairo. It is also an extremely busy time of the year for locals. The average temperature can reach about 93 degrees during the day, and never more than an average of 72 at night. No rain fell during that season, and the sun beat down for roughly 13 hours each day. Moving men and animals, food and supplies under heavy chainmail caused more casualties from heat exhaustion than did the violence. Meanwhile, Al-Kamil's brother in Syria, fearing what the victory and presence of such a large army of crusaders would mean for the stability of the region, reconciled with Al-Kamil for the mutual benefit of making a meaningful stand at Mansoura. Back in the Crusader camp, John of Brienne was more worried about the fact that it was now already so far into the summer. They only had a period of weeks before what the locals came to call Akhet, the annual flooding of the Nile River from its banks. This would impact a battle on Mansoura maybe more than the armies themselves. John understood the challenge of the Nile River floodplain and created a plan that factored on the rising banks. Much to his chagrin and that of the other Crusaders, the legate Pelagius did not take heed of John's warnings. By August, any type of battle had fell apart. The Crusaders' position was untenable. Forced to head back toward Damietta, Al-Kamil intercepted the Christians and had his men dispatched to block any retreat. One wonders what was going through the mind of Pelagius now. He had been insistent on the Pope's vision, as time and again it went counter to the military sense of experienced crusaders. Now they were surrounded, no escape, and all they had to look forward to was ransom for dignitaries and slavery or no quarter for the rank and file. It would be a public relations nightmare for both Honorius III and Frederick II. Left with no other choice and his pride broken, Pelagius finally relented and turned control over to John of Brienne. John implemented his years of training and understanding of what it took to fight Saracens. With the Templar Knights present, they were able to bolster the force into an effective enough war engine to at least survive intact and start fighting their way out and back toward Damietta. Panic struck the faces of the Crusaders, though, as they began to see the dust of the desert kicking up into a great cloud on the horizon. Their fear grew as they heard the distinct rumble of hooves and murmuring voices. A force was approaching, a large one. This wasn't Al-Kamil either. These men were Syrian. It was Al-Ashraf Musa, Al-Kamil's brother. Just as the plight of the Crusaders was about to intensify dramatically, the battlefield fell silent. Al-Kamil had realized something as he rode out to meet his brother. Camille thought to himself that if he did beat the Crusader army here, half the Crusader force was still back at Damietta, with Frederick still en route. It would be better to strike some kind of truce, where they have to agree to leave altogether. In a show of restraint and diplomatic acumen, Al-Kamil offered his terms of truce. Perhaps unfairly, some scholars have used this episode to suggest that Al-Kamil was not as fully committed to Crusades as other Muslim leaders. Yet this criticism may not be accurate. Perhaps Al-Kamil could instead strike a deal that would clear Egypt of all the Crusader forces, including their progress at Damietta. The Crusaders received a message from Al-Kamil. Retreat from the field. Abandon Damietta. Release prisoners. Pay ransom for the return of your own soldiers. Withdraw from Egypt, and an 8-year peace would exist. There was little choice but to accept or die in the desert hundreds of miles from home. Meanwhile, back in Damietta, more troops under the newly crowned Emperor Frederick II had just arrived and disembarked from the steady arrival of galleys. Not far behind was the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II himself. Instead of arriving to a war camp bustling with preparations, he was surprised and horrified by what he saw. His orders had clearly not been heeded. Where was the army prepared to take the field? Why weren't the city contingencies in operation? Frederick was livid, but it was too late. The emperor's entourage was horrified to learn that Damietta was about to be returned to the Muslims. Now they would all be heading back, and it would be 8 years, 8 long years, before another stand could be made. Pelagius became hated back home for his machinations, while Emperor Frederick II was criticized for not showing up until too late. In his case, he had little choice. But the bad public relations from the Crusade would certainly take some time to live down. 8 years provided ample time to do it. Al-Kamil, on the other hand, proved to be an able tactician among emperors and kings, even if it was his brother's presence from Syria that had made him most uneasy. As had historically been the case, the infighting among Islamic leadership was one faction overthrowing another. In this case, saved the Crusader army to fight another day. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next time when we begin laying the groundwork for one of the most fascinating chapters in the Crusades' history, the road to the 6th Crusade. Talk to you next time.